welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm so glad all of you are joining us. We're recording live here from Austin, Texas. And with me in studio is none other than Pastor Muhammad Ali. Welcome, Pastor Mo.
Yep.
And then also with me is Mrs. Catie Sas, one of my favorite people in the world. Katie rocking a side braid, looking good.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
You know.
We're really excited to have all of you with us. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about this morning beyond the side braid is the Catholic Church, through the Pope, has kind of radically departed from their past historical doctrine of not blessing same-sex marriage, and now they're pronouncing blessings upon gay couples that are asking the church to bless their marriage. And Pastor Mo shot me a text, I think it was December 18th, saying, hey, you got to check this out. And I was like, man, this is great fodder to talk about, because I think this is the direction that most of culture is headed, although I do feel like there's a strong counterculture underneath all that we're going to see heading itself up in a couple years. But for right now, this is it. It's like if you don't subscribe to the LGBTQIA agenda, then you're sort of missing out on being on the right side of history. So let's talk about this. First off, when we were talking before this podcast, what does it mean for a priest or a pope to bless a same-sex marriage? And I think that question is probably predicated, what's it mean to bless something? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we were asking that earlier. Yeah. I mean, and you asked the great question of,
why does it have to go through the priest?
Right. Historically, and I think what I love about you, Katie, is from your perspective, we all have the perspective that our faith, like Christianity, sort of started when we became a Christian. And historically, thousands of years ago, you would bring to the priest your horse, your carriage, mm-hmm. your home, your whatever, your building. I'm dedicating this building to God. And it was a really righteous reason to do it. And then the question you asked, okay, I'm down with it being a righteous reason. I'm all for my house being blessed by God. And I said earlier, too, that whenever Austin was like sub 2 years old, screaming his brains out, we were like casting demons out of his bedroom. We were doing whatever we could for sleep because it was just like...
Oh, yeah, you're miserable.
You're miserable.
You feel
anyway.
miserable, yeah.
And so why can't a person that's not of the cloth just bless a building, a car, or whatever? And if you're a person that subscribes to the royal priesthood of believers, as all of us here on this podcast do, then of course you would do that. But if you haven't experienced that, or if part of your Christian tradition hasn't fully embraced what the royal priesthood of believers means, mm-hmm. then stuff like only a pastor or a priest or an ordained person can give communion. Only a pastor or a priest can baptize a believer.
I just think it's like giving too much power and authority to mere people. Like you're a priest,
It's not giving enough power to those who are not ordained in a way. I think it's definitely authority. Christians have authority,
right? But when you're not a pastor anymore, there's going to come a time when you're not a pastor anymore.
Sure.
Do you still have the same authority over people?
Okay, so no.
Right. So a priest, like, it's not like he's this. It's not like he's the king over the church. I mean, if we want to bless something, then we can ask God to bless it. We don't need to go through
So you don't need an intermediary. So I think
we don't need to go through somebody else.
I think there's a difference between needing an intermediary for blessing and then the other thing of having an authority. And I think that's the challenging part. I think what happens with a lot of evangelicals, as we sort of like anything Catholic is bad, we kind of just shove anything Catholic to the bad category. And what you miss out on, there is an authority that the church has. And so I think understanding that your authority to bless your house does come from God, but his conduit of himself on earth is the church. And so you don't want to...
But I think there are some people that like worship what the priests say over what God says.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially like in the Catholic Church. It's like,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that becomes that's the problem.
I'm going to trust the priest over what my
100%.
actual
Yes,
Bible
yes.
says or what.
Yeah. And I think that's the frustrating thing. Mo, any thoughts on just blessing in general?
Yeah, so there's in the Catholic Church apparently there's two types of blessing, and then I don't know if he said which type of blessing
Oh, that's a good question.
this was for over the marriage, but I guess we can make up our minds. Blessings are categorized into two types: invocative and constitutive. In an invocative blessing, the minister implores the divine favor of God to grant some sort of spiritual or temporal good without any change of condition, such as when a parent blesses a child. This blessing is also a recognition of God's goodness in bestowing this blessing upon us, such as when we offer a blessing for our food at mealtime. And a constitutive blessing invoked by a bishop or priest or deacon signifies the permanent sanctification and dedication of a person or thing for some sacred purpose. Here, the person or object takes on a sacred character that would not be returned to non-sacred or profane use. For example, when religious sisters or brothers profess final vows, they're blessed, indicating a permanent change in their lives.
Wow. Okay. So
I would, if I were to guess, I mean, when you're blessing a marriage, sounds sacred to me. You know what I'm saying?
Sounds like you're approving of sin.
Yeah.
So is this? Give me the two words. It's invocative and what was the second
I
one?
have no idea. Let's see. And constitutive.
Constitutive.
Yep.
So the invocative one is you're asking. It's like the parental "I'm blessing the child" thing.
Yep.
I think that's what they're saying. This is
The marriage one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in this recent article, he says ultimately a blessing offers people a means to increase their trust in God.
Right.
The request for a blessing thus expresses and nurtures openness to the transcendence, mercy, and closeness to God in 1,000 concrete circumstances of life, which is no small thing in the world in which we live. So if you're going to bless in this way a same-sex couple as a means to increase their trust in God, then that means they're going to deepen. Your hope is that they deepen their relationship with God, which means that eventually they're going to come to a place where they're convicted of the relationship that was blessed in the first place.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
So what is the point?
Yeah, I think it's okay. So here's where I don't want to always just go Catholic Church is evil.
Well, no, I'm not saying that.
And I'm not saying that either. However, I think it's very problematic. So here's the problem with this is it everyone hearing this, like, we don't know what invocative versus constitutive means. And if you're going with an invocative blessing, it seems like, to your point, why do you need to make a statement that you can do this? So, like, if a child comes up for a blessing, you don't go like, hey, have you been sinning lately? Is there any darkness in your heart? You just bless the child.
Right.
Okay. And so if it's that, well then, if for example, every time you come up for communion and you're not Catholic, you get a blessing. Like so if you're not Catholic, meaning like you haven't been baptized in the Catholic Church, then you're not supposed to take communion. So you go up there, and I saw this actually at Cody's father-in-law's funeral, and not that we should make light of a funeral, but there was this moment. Can I tell the story, Cody? Cody, you back there? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll tell the story. All right. So we're at this funeral, and a guy that goes up, they have communion at every service, no matter what it is. There's communion, and so means of grace.
Yeah.
And so they go up for communion. And it's like 1,000 people at this funeral. It was amazing. It was in a small town. It was standing room only. So anyway, at the funeral, which we all went to, but we may have left earlier than it ended. And so at the end of it, they're all taking communion, and this guy goes up for communion. And if you haven't taken communion, sometimes what the priest will do is he'll put the host or the bread in your mouth for you. So you walk up to him and you go,
Oh, gross.
and then you drink from the chalice. So like everybody drinks from the same chalice. He wipes it, turns it, gives it to the next, boom, and you just kind of go through it. That's how you do it in the Catholic Church. Well, this guy goes up, and he's clearly not Catholic, and then the the priest is wanting to put the bread in his mouth, and he's not opening his mouth, and there's this awkward moment because I don't think his English was all that good because I don't think he ain't from around her, and he was trying to do communion, and then eventually he realized he wasn't Catholic, and then he blessed him, and I think that's what we're talking about here with the blessing. All right, now I think. Which an invocative blessing, it's strange to me because there's more from the Vatican. They wrote Cardinal Fernandez said the declaration remains firm on the traditional doctrine of the Church about marriage, not allowing any type of liturgical rite or blessing similar to a liturgical rite that can create confusion. But it also explores the pastoral meaning of blessings in a way that opens the possibility of blessing couples in irregular situations and same-sex couples without officially validating their status or changing in any way the Church's perennial teaching on marriage. The Church remains firm in teaching that marriage can be contracted only between one man and one woman, he said, and continues to insist that rites and prayers that could create confusion about a marriage and another form of relationship are inadmissible. So I think this is the struggle, is I have a feeling that not everybody's on the same page at the Catholic Church.
I don't think so. So in 2021, it says they were asked, does the church have the power to give the blessing to unions of persons of the same sex? And they answered no.
Right.
The church says its answer regarding same-sex couples, quote, declares illicit any form of blessing that tends to acknowledge their unions as such.
Right.
And it says that it does not and cannot bless sin, which is exactly what Katie said.
Right.
So then the question is, since 2021, did the definition of blessing change, or did the definition of sin change? Something changed.
Something changed. And that's the part where it seems confusing because in at least the article that was kind of came out the same day as the one you sent me, the guy was explaining it, and I think to pacify the cardinals that are maybe on more of the conservative side, they're like, this is an invocative blessing, much like the God bless you. But that seems weird that you would make it about the same sex.
It just shows the lack of credibility that the Catholic Church has. This is what it shows.
Yeah, listen. Okay.
Like, if you're not going to believe the Bible, if you're not going to trust and follow the Bible, then what are you doing? Get out of this role, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, and again, and this is where it's being at a church where we have many people that struggle with same-sex attraction, and we totally love them and affirm them in their Christianity, not in their sexuality or their sexual preference or sin. I think that's what's hard. And I think that what the church has struggled with, and to be fair, no one has really figure this out, especially with the sexual cultural revolution that's happening. They're trying to be, I think what happened, they're trying to receive people lovingly. As I read a church history book recently, so I'm totally enamored by it. Council of Trent, they doubled down on the Catholic Church is not open to any other reality of salvation by grace by means of faith. And they locked the church down. They kind of kept it medieval up until the mid-1900s. And so I think what's happened is they're like, we don't want to do that again. And so they want to get on the right side of history on the front end as opposed to hold on to the doctrinal truths, which are, clearly communicated throughout the ages as morally right and wrong. And I think that's what's really hard.
Holding people accountable to sin is not loving them.
Right.
Like,
because I think and I think this is what they're saying. Like, what about a a heterosexual relationship? I got my baby mama here and I got my baby mama there, and I just listen, church, I need you to bless it.
No.
Right.
No.
But I think that's what they're saying. And like I've got my one family here and my other family here. I need you to bless that.
No.
It's
a no.
And I think that's the struggle that we're facing, or at least the Catholic Church is facing, is that they haven't brought clarity. And even in this, I think they're trying to bring some clarity, but it created a whole sense of confusion.
Who's trying to bring clarity? Hold up. Who's trying to bring clarity?
So I think
Is the Pope trying to
the
bring
Pope
clarity?
wanted to bring clarity,
No.
and then his cardinals came around behind him and said, "Actually, we don't really believe that," and kind of was like, "No, we hold to traditional marriage, blah 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 blah." And I think the Pope is wanting to take it down a more progressive route,
Right. It comes down to the verse. Am I trying to please man or am I trying to please God?
right,
He's obviously not trying to please God.
right. And I think this is where I don't want to say it's all about numbers, but you could argue they're like, hey, listen, we're dying here. Yeah, like we have been losing people, especially in the West.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you were to go to a Catholic church, even here around Texas, you probably get an African missionary to Texas that can barely speak English. That's the priest, the local parish priest, because they can't find anybody because. The Catholics have sort of given up on. You're not having more young men wanting to be priests.
You're not wanting to raise a church. You're wanting to just raise.
You're wanting to keep something going.
You're wanting to raise your own platform, and it's it's just sad. It's like
it is sad.
It's like we have completely blurred the lines between loving people versus calling out sin.
Right. And I think this
in the name of compassion, which
Sure.
isn't even godly compassion. It's this worldly compassion. It's like suddenly now this worldly compassion is like stomping on godly compassion.
Right. So I think the struggle is this. Is the world, we are called to evangelize the world. And I think if you were to ask the Pope, why are you doing this? His initial reason would be they need to see that God loves them. And his solution is, therefore, we're gonna bless their sin so that they see that they're loved by God. And I can appreciate that heart. However, let's say those people start attending Catholic church and they start becoming, they're like, well, what's going to prevent me from being? You need not only bless my marriage with the invocative blessing, it needs to be a constitutive blessing. And so more and more people there's going to be a growing wave of that. And I think this is where the evangelical church could learn a lot from this. When this is not a pronouncement of judgment on the evangelical church, because everyone's got their own calling from
keep
God.
going.
And blah, blah, blah.
Keep
but
going.
I think what happens when you don't bring clarity to what sin is and what sin isn't,
right.
It makes it confusing. So one of my favorite professors, Howard Hendricks, says, he used to say, a mist in the pulpit is a fog in the pew. So when I'm not clear about what sin is and what sin is not, then what I'm making it it's up to your own interpretation, which, to be fair, for a long time evangelical world, and probably for a long time the church history, you didn't have to worry about people going. You never talked about homosexuality because that was just like that was just sin. Everyone sort of knew that. But as sin became more acceptable, normalized, then all of a sudden people started saying like, well, why can't they? I mean, how is that really that bad? And what was once seen as in Romans 1, same-sex couples or a same-sex situation was seen as actual judgment on a particular people, which is sort of wild to think about.
So this makes me just question what's next. Like,
right.
what is the Catholic Church gonna normalize and accept next?
Right.
Are we because back in the day, homosexuality was illegal. Like it was. I mean, it used to be like how we see pedophilia now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I think pedophilia will be the next.
Is pedophilia going to be the
one of those
next?
Right. That's why movies
thing
like what's
that
the one
well, we want people that struggle with pedophilia to feel accepted and loved in the church too. So we're gonna start normalizing it and saying we're gonna bless you in this desire that you have and. Like,
well, there's already the North American Man Boy Love Association. They lobby Congress all the time.
It's already happening. And so the more and more we accept sin just because culture has normalized it.
Yeah, and this becomes
where are we going?
When you talk about go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
Oh no, I was agreeing, and that's literally what I was Googling. I was Googling blessings for transitions. and there's literally a blessing for gender transitioning.
Yeah, like what are we going to start doing? Like, is the Catholic Church going to just start
And
going,
they
well,
use
maybe
scripture.
there are more than,
Wait.
there's more than
Hold
two
on.
genders.
Give me the blessing for the transgender.
So look at this. The first blessing refers to God as the transforming one, Hava Mavir. They're getting the Hebrew, dude. Jews are crossing over people because we crossed over the Jordan River into Canaan and whatever. And there's a bunch of, you go to the Midrash, and so you know what I mean?
Well,
When you wanna
midrash
find-
is
Oh,
a
yeah.
dangerous thing in and of itself.
Right,
You
right,
can
right.
interpret
I mean-
scripture to mean whatever.
Right.
People justify homosexuality in the Bible by David and Jonathan's relationship.
Right.
Well, this is the
So
classic
it-
thing
Yeah.
of deconstruction. So
Yeah.
and listen, there are some people that's come to faith through deconstruction, so I don't want to say it's just blanket, but for the most part, deconstruction, what you're saying is like, I can't trust what the people who have traditionally been teaching have said about what this means. So we
For
are
2,000 years.
For 2,000 years, I am throwing that out, and I'm starting over from 2024 with what I'm now going to take my cultural lens, apply it to the Bible, and then I'm now going to read it.
Yeah.
And that is always a problem. And then they would say, no, I'm going back to what Paul originally meant. The problem is when you're saying, I'm going back to what Paul originally meant, and then you're just negating every
Everything.
historian
Yeah.
up until this point. You're then saying, no, I am me and all the knowledge I have. And most of the people that are doing this aren't exactly super scholars. They're usually white suburban moms who have nothing better to do, and they just want to feel good. Anyway, what happens is you get to this place where you're like, I want people to like me, and my neighbor is doing something that's sinful, and I feel like I need to accept them wholeheartedly for who they are and bless, and the same thing the Catholic Church, and bless their marriage, as opposed to love my neighbor and then share the gospel with them. And you don't have to be a complete jerk about it,
Right,
but you
right.
do need to stand up for truth. And I think
Yes.
that's what's happened is because we don't do conflict very well at all.
Yeah.
We want to, and to be
We
fair,
want to make everyone feel good.
we want to make everybody
and
feel good. And
There's
never-
a
and you never
line.
will.
There is a line,
Yeah.
and we keep moving it.
Right.
We keep scooting the line the second it starts upsetting people.
right.
And like, why?
So yeah, and so I think that the struggle that we have is because we're not allowed to have a conversation where we disagree with somebody, and I think the conversation goes like this: Hey, I think that's sin. I don't think that's sin. And then you say, well, we agree to disagree.
What's the Bible say?
Or you go, the problem with that is you've redefined sin, and so that makes it a problem for what Jesus died for. So did Jesus, and then you go, you're not repentant. And that's why the homosexuality thing is a big deal, is what we see homosexuality is the judgment in and of itself. Romans 1 says, like, because of the perversion of worshiping the created thing versus the God who is, God gave people over to do things that not to be done, which is like men and women gave up natural desire for one another, and men gave into perversity for men with men and women with women. And so I think a lot of times back in the 80s and 90s, AIDS was seen as God's judgment on homosexuality. And I'm saying, no, that's not God's judgment on homosexuality. Was God's judgment on, so because that's what the Bible says. And I think what they took it as is like, no, you're pointing out that my sin caused this thing to happen. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because you rejected God, He gave you over to your sin. And so all the ramifications that come with that, and that's the natural order of things that God created in His design. I know that seems like we're going way off on a tangent on this, but I think it's super important to say a call out to churches everywhere, even if you're not in our denomination, like hold fast to the Word of God. It's unchanging, and it might cause us to fall out of favor with government, fall out of favor with culture, and we might now be in the minority and then even be martyred, which I don't want to like sign up for martyrdom.
Well, so what?
But
This
I
is
think that's
not
part
our
of it.
home.
Yeah.
Like, who
Right.
cares?
Which I appreciate
Like,
that.
this is not where we live.
Right. And I think this comes into like, are we to be, I think the challenge then becomes, what are we supposed to do in government? And I think this is the struggle that a lot of people, we're ambassadors for Christ representing another kingdom. This kingdom isn't our own. And we can give advice, and if we're put in governmental positions, we want to lead it as God would do it on earth as in heaven. But ultimately, we don't put our hope in any government official, any government plan, because we know every government, even when the Puritans tried to put, we're doing Christian everything, the problem is you have unsaved people then entering into government who are trying to implement Christian law, and it's going to break down at some point.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean we give up on law, but what
Right.
it does mean is that you've got to
Because we're not
understand that the justice on this side of heaven is going to be limited because you have unredeemed people that are in governmental situations and don't have the Holy Spirit to help operate and guide. Anyway.
So we have been on a slippery slope for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Slippery slope.
Sure.
We are in a waterfall now.
Right.
No longer on a slippery slope. Nobody's trying to hide anything. Nobody's trying to keep anything under the rug. Like we are just dangling in a waterfall.
Sure, I will say.
floodgates
I will
have
say
opened.
before I know that it's all doom and gloom. There are some things that we can rejoice about. So, for example, one of the things that I think we were on an awful dark-sided slope one was like racism, like slavery, Jim Crow, 1964 things changed, and so that was a huge win for Christianity. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for that. That the primary drivers of civil rights and things was Christians. The problem is it left the Christian camp and then started to become dominated by like the LGBTQIA, co-opted civil rights and took it to sin as opposed to human dignity, which is all about pro-life movement would be in that camp of like we value the life of every human being.
Okay, are we going to talk about every single thing? Or
Well,
are we
I'm
just
just
talk
saying.
about
I think this is the part of it. Is like I think there's some things we don't want to just go like the world is completely lost.
No, I'm saying when it comes to like the LGBTQ
Sure,
community,
absolutely.
we are no longer on a slippery slope.
We are on a straight
we
up.
are straight up. Floodgates are open. Everything is welcome. Everything is okay and approved of and normal.
But wouldn't you say, and I'd love for Pastor Mo to jump in, there is a counterculture that's rising up that's not for that.
Right.
And I think it's probably highlighted by Jordan Peterson. Like, I think Jordan, I don't want to say like he's Christian by any stretch of the imagination, but he is like arguing for a Judeo-Christian worldview, adamantly outspoken, and it's his, I think he's cultivating a lot of young people, young men especially, to kind of jump on the bandwagon to say no to the crazy. So I think there is a countercultural, anytime there's a movement, there's always a counter movement. And so I think you're seeing this happen as men are called to more traditional setting. In fact, even within marriages, you're seeing women embracing more a traditional role all across the board. I've never seen it quite like I've seen it.
So I'm not saying there's not a counterculture.
Yes.
I'm saying the ladder has risen up
100%.
and is like getting real out of hand.
100,000%.
There's one of my old neighbors. She is super liberal. One of her stepsons, they call Claire now.
Oh wow.
Because he is
Used to be Clyde.
no his.
Sorry.
Anyways, so that's beyond the point. But she shared this article that you sent me.
Oh really?
And she shared it, and she said, "This is amazing. What a great step in the right direction for the church. I've always loved this pope. Like this.
What
this
did you
is
say to
great."
that?
I didn't. What am I going to respond with? Like,
Why did she text you?
no, she didn't text me. She shared it on.
Oh,
Facebook.
I thought she texted
So,
it to you.
No,
Sorry.
on
no.
Facebook.
I mean, if
Oh, I
she
see.
sent it to me and asked me what my opinion
Yeah,
was, then
yeah,
I would
yeah.
have
Oh, okay.
shared.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
But
she
like,
shared it on Facebook.
she shared it on Facebook.
Oh, yeah,
What,
yeah.
I'm not gonna like
No,
comment
yeah.
and be like, this is ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
so
It's
but
hard.
It's
It's
just
hard
like,
because I see
there
that stuff.
are
And I
so
can't.
many people that are unchurched.
Right.
Okay, because she's not a Christian. She's not a church
Right.
person. But so many people are gonna see this.
Is she a white suburban mom?
No.
Okay.
There are so many people that are gonna see this.
She a minority?
And she's from Brazil.
Okay.
She's Brazilian. Her family is actually Catholic, but she left like the Catholic belief. And her main thing with leaving the
Those
church
gay people.
was they don't accept homosexuality.
That's
and so
funny.
now
What
it's
she-
like,
yeah.
oh, well, now that But I'm not saying her specifically. I'm saying there are so many people that are unchurched that are now going to start coming to church, which good, but also the only reason they're coming to church, they're more welcoming to the idea of church, is because the church is affirming sin.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like okay, good that like more people that are unchurched are going to start coming to church, but like what are they listening to? What are
Right.
they hearing?
Yeah, and this is where
Because it's clearly not the Bible.
So like the independent Baptist, King James only churches that have been hardcore on all sorts of things for all time are not affected by any of this. But us, we try and be. I mean, we've been more seeker sensitive, and so it affects us because what happens? The world starts evangelizing us, and so that means we've got to do a really good job of being very clear because we do want whatever you're coming from to come into our church. We just don't want our church to be. We want to be clear about what Jesus says, what sin is. And I think that's the struggle. I think if I were to pinpoint the struggle of the evangelical church right now, it's that. It's that we were not prepared for the entire culture shifting and that the culture evangelizing Christians as opposed to Christians evangelizing the culture.
Sure.
And I think that's, if I'm just honest, I think that's my, I don't want to say fear, but that's the struggle I face every Sunday is I want to bring clear understanding of what the gospel says about what sin is and what it's not. I want people that are not Christian to be offended by the gospel and not by a secondary thing. However, the secondary things move into primary things when it affects what sin is. And I think
when it's ignored.
When it's ignored.
Yeah.
And I think that's the struggle I personally have is I'm like, when do I bring down, I guess, for them, that'd be the hammer. Oh my gosh, I'm out. Like you've offended me too much. When do I bring that up and when do I hold back? And when is, what's the appropriate time for that? And I think
as soon as it comes out, because it would be cool for you to hear you get on stage and be like, well, the Catholic Church is blessing marriages. Just know if you're attending Wells Branch Church, we're not going to bless it.
Right.
Like for me to hear that, I'd be like, dang, something just happened. You just addressed it, and I know where we stand.
Yeah, and that's why I
Right.
feel like, yeah. So I think
cool.
You can't tiptoe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying I want to
That'd be
tiptoe.
cool.
It would be cool.
That'd be cool,
Like
man.
I think what we've done in the past is
It's
we
recent. It's not like you're going to what he said like 3 years ago.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
like something that
just happened, and that's why I feel like the podcast ends up being really great spot for that.
Yeah.
Because we did a
Why
sermon.
can't you do it on?
Oh, I've done on the stage. Remember, I brought up.
No, I
remember,
know, but I'm saying why
It
would
just
you?
doesn't. I don't know.
I mean, cool.
I love you guys. I think the struggle for me is it relevant to the passage we're looking at?
Yeah.
And I don't want to. It's like one thing this is my pet peeve of Bible stuff is like you're in one verse, but you really want to talk about this other thing. It reminds me of the North Carolina Cape something whatever. The Serpentarium. You know the one that Nate Bargatze talks about. You guys ever seen this joke?
I know who you're talking about.
So he talks about he goes to this Serpentarium and like the first thing you show up, you want to see snakes, and it says like, here's this anti-government thing, and he goes like, hey, I got some snakes, but I really want to talk to you about this anti-government thing, and it's like, I came here for snakes. I came here to hear about the Bible. I came here to about Jesus, and you're wanting to talk about same-sex marriage, and I feel like there's a place for it, and I feel like this is it. So, and I think this is helpful that I'm not going to go over the top just kind of like on a Sunday morning and be like, I'm going to stick it to the man, which I don't have a problem doing.
If it's a recent event, I feel like something just happened.
People need to know where we stand on current events.
Right, and I think that's where this comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we're doing here. Like, clearly, we're not blessing same-sex marriage.
No.
Clearly, we're wanting to stand for, and I think we're going to get to some of it when we talk about sexuality in Exodus. Honestly, in the third week of it, we're going to get into.
But it's kind of like if there's like a big shooting that just happened.
Right.
You address it on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's true.
You know
That is true. Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
You would. You would. Yeah.
I'd still love to go to Rome and check out. I mean, they're going to start losing money, obviously, but I'd still like to check out all those big buildings while they're still there. The Catholic buildings.
Well, they're going to be museums.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think, well, and this is what I'm like, look at all the church property. Like, will the Methodist church are they going to be able to sustain? Now, and this is the part where I go and this is the part where for a long time I've argued against taxing churches because I'm like, no, you can't, blah, blah, blah. But now I'm like, why not? Because what's going to happen is the churches that.
It's just not just Texas. I'm sure other states, but in California, churches get taxed.
Do they really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a state thing. Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
All
I
right.
didn't
Well,
know that.
okay, there you go.
Yep.
And that's why you just meet in a school, I guess. I guess we still get taxed here because we pay taxes renting this particular building. So we pay.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So because it's
There's no way
not,
to avoid that?
if the owner would just give us the property, and then we bless them with a, I don't know, like a service fee or something, then that could work.
Or the
for
constitutive blessing.
Yeah. Anyway. Nice. Hey, listen. Thanks so much for watching. We talked a lot about a lot of stuff, and you make sure you like, share, and subscribe, especially if you're like wondering like where does the church stand on like same-sex marriage and how should we like handle it and how should we articulate what our view is and how should we love people that are that don't believe like us because they don't have the Holy Spirit. How do we encounter people like that? And I think this is a great way to introduce them to the podcast, help them bring clarity. We love people from all walks of life. We don't endorse sin, but we want all people to be saved. And if you say you're without sin, then you're self-deceived. But God is faithful and just. He will forgive you if you just simply come to him. That's the message that we want everyone to hear over and over again. So make sure you like, share, subscribe. Tell all your friends about us. We'd love to hear from you. And Katie, any other final thoughts?
The Bible is clear. That's all I'm going to say.
Pastor Mo? All right, from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.